Jesus told stories called parables to teach us important lessons about how to live as a Christian. The Good Samaritan is one of the most important parables Jesus ever told because it explains the importance of loving our neighbors. To love your neighbor as yourself is the second greatest commandment according to Jesus, and a central message of Christianity. As we all know, that is easier said than done. Before we begin the parable of the Good Samaritan, it is important to understand that Jews and Samaritans greatly disliked one another during Jesus' time. Since they hated each other so much, it was almost unheard of for a Jew to help a Samaritan, or for a Samaritan to help a Jew. This makes the parable of the Good Samaritan even more meaningful. One day, late in the afternoon, a Jewish merchant was traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho on a lonely public road. As the sun began to set, the merchant hurried his donkey along. Many crimes were committed on this public road, especially after dark, and he knew it was dangerous. A little further down the road, a group of robbers lay watching him from a grove of fig trees. "Look, here comes a rich peddler," the leader whispered to the group as he pulled on his gray beard. With eyes open wide, straining to see the oncoming cart while crouching and signaling the other younger robbers to move back, the leader added, "That cart is loaded with treasures. There must be at least 10 carpets and 20 bolts of silk. Now stay low till I signal you." As he watched the sun go down, the merchant was worried. "Maybe I should have skipped the last stop. It will be dark in the next 20 minutes, and I'm at least an hour and a half away from home." As the merchant rounded the bend in the road, the robbers leapt from their hiding place within the fig tree grove. Using clubs, they beat the peddler viciously until he is unconscious. Then they stole everything he had of value, including his donkey and cart. Then they fled, leaving the merchant for dead. A little while after the robbers left, a priest happened upon the scene of the crime. He saw the wounded merchant lying on the side of the road with many injuries. It was obvious the man had been robbed, and the priest was scared that the robbers might still be close by. After hesitating for a moment, the priest crossed to the other side of the road and rushed along his way. "The robbers must still be in the area. I better keep going." A little later, a priest's assistant, who was known as a Levite, came along the same road and found the injured merchant, moaning. His wounds were obviously serious, and he was still bleeding. The Levite paused just long enough to think, "This man has been seriously hurt, and his wounds are still fresh. His attackers must be close by." Mumbling a prayer, he turned around and walked quickly down the road. Later that evening, a middle-aged Samaritan man came by on a donkey. He had a touch of gray hair and was dressed differently from the other men. As his donkey approached the grove of fig trees, he heard the merchants moaning, and he rode his donkey over to investigate. As soon as he saw the injured man, the Samaritan stopped his donkey and rushed to help him. First, he took one of his own shirts from his bag and tore it into strips to use as bandages. Then he used a mixture of oil and wine to clean the merchant's wounds. Next, he bound up the merchant's wounds to stop them from bleeding. And finally, the Samaritan gently lifted the merchant onto his donkey. The merchant regained consciousness just long enough to say, "Oh, praise God you came along. I would have surely died. Thank you, kind sir." Then he passed out again. After an hour of travel, stopping several times to adjust the wounded man's body on the donkey, they arrived at an inn on the outskirts of Jerusalem. The Samaritan gently helped the merchant down from the donkey. He sat him down, leaning him against the building, while he went to talk to the innkeeper. Opening his purse, the Samaritan removed several silver coins. "Sir, I have a badly wounded man outside who must rest until he heals. I've dressed his wounds, and I'll stop back next week. Can I count on you?" The Levite, who had passed earlier, sat at a table eating a dinner of bread and lamb and drinking wine. When he saw the Samaritan talking to the innkeeper, he whispered to his meal companion, "Look, there's a Samaritan talking to the innkeeper. How dare he come into a respectful place like this?" The Samaritan and innkeeper had carried the injured merchant to an upstairs room and laid him gently into bed. Seeing the concerned look on the Samaritan's face, the innkeeper said, "Don't worry. I will change this man's dressing each morning and evening. My wife will serve him his meals in his room. We'll take good care of him." The Samaritan thanked the innkeeper, stroked the wounded merchant's head, and left the room. The following week, the Samaritan returned to the inn. The merchant had recovered from his injuries and was sitting at a dining room table eating his lunch. When he saw the Samaritan, he stood and said, "Sir, I owe my life to you. How can I ever repay you?" "Seeing you recovering nicely is all the reward I need," the Samaritan responded, smiling as he walked towards the merchant. Embracing him and looking into his eyes, the Samaritan added, "I only ask that you remember this kindness and help any people you meet who are in need. We are all our brother's keepers, and helping others is its own reward. I am a happier man for having helped you." The Good Samaritan is one of several Bible stories Jesus used to teach us about how important it is to help people in need and not judge others just because of their race or religion. Jesus uses this parable to underscore his second greatest commandment: love your neighbor as yourself. The story also shows us how hard it can be to follow this commandment. We can learn a lot from these stories about how we should live our lives, how to be better people, and how to please God.